The state cares that you tell your client the truth, because that's what Standard Rule 2-3 says. I certify that to the best of my knowledge and belief. Every statement of fact in this appraisal report is true and correct.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Justin Harris.
His name is Mr. Tim Anderson. Welcome back, my friend.
Justin, hi. How are you? It's good to be with you. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, my friend. I love catching up with you. You and I have been talking a little bit off the air. It's fun to be your friend, my friend.
Justin, thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot. And it is wonderful to be yours. Thank you.
We're going to dive right into what we've talked about last time you were on, Tim. And, usually on these Dear USPAP Instructor episodes, we talk about very specific questions that listeners write in about. Sometimes they write me at the coach at theappraisercoach.com. Sometimes they write you at Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com. But nonetheless, they get a hold of us frequently about questions that they might have regarding USPAP. And as you know, Tim, I am no USPAP expert. You are. And so I often defer to you, but often we come to the microphone with these questions. Sometimes we use their name if we have permission. Sometimes we come anonymously if we don't. But in cases like today and the last time that you and I met, this is kind of a conglomeration of questions, right?
Yeah, let us unconglomerate them.
All right, cool. So we've got two topics that we're going to focus on. We're going to hit one. We'll do a quick sponsorship, and then we'll come back with the second. But the first one had to do with land sales. Specifically, let me just set it up this way, Tim. I often, when I do reviews, which is not very often, but when I do reviews, I often see appraisers kind of taking a standard approach of, hey, there's no vacant land sales, so I'm just going to grab the assessor's land value. I'm going to throw that in there instead. Anything wrong with that, Tim?
Dustin, yes, as a matter of fact, there is. The big issue, Dustin, is in the cost approach. When the cost approach asks appraisers to indicate the vacant site value, it means the site's market value, not its value for assessment purposes, which is exactly how the property appraiser, the tax assessor, assesses it for ad valorem tax purposes. So it is by definition not market value. And to include it as an indication of the site's market value as if it were vacant, when indeed we're not talking about market value, we're talking about assessed value, is by definition misleading, because we're concealing a pertinent fact. That pertinent fact is that is the assessment for ad valorem tax valuation purposes, not market value. Now, you mentioned, you put this in the context of not having land sales. Okay, that might be a good place to start, but then it would require the explanation that this is for ad valorem tax purposes. It's not for market value purposes. And then there are other ways to get the site value other than through comparable sales. And that might be through extraction from other sales in the neighborhood or allocation. Allocation basically starts with the tax assessed value. But then what you do is you go through and you figure out the percentage, the ratio of the site value for ad valorem tax purposes to the total value of ad valorem tax purposes. And let's suppose you get a ratio of 25%. Then basically what you would do is you would apply that ratio to the sales, your comparable sales, and indicate that as the market value, because you're basing it on a known quantity, the assessment, but then you're getting a ratio from it and applying that ratio to market value, which is the sales price of the property. Is it the best way to come up with a site value? No, but it's one way, and it's an acceptable way to do it. So you've got extraction and you've got allocation. And if that's all you've got, then say so. Tell the client that this is the best you can do. And it's market supported. It may not be exact. It may not be perfect, but the market supports it. And therefore you're going to run with it because those are all the data you could come up with. We're not supposed to make sales up, Dustin, as convenient as that might be. Yeah. But all we got to do is market support what we do.
Well, and let's dive into that just a little bit more, if you don't mind, because I would assume there's some listeners that are hearing what you're saying and agreeing. Saying on one hand, well, yeah, I get what Tim's saying, but hey, you know what? This is the way my mentor taught me. If you don't have land sales, you throw in the tax value. Let's get a little gritty at this point. What are some consequences to taking that approach? In other words, what if somebody is listening to what you're saying and saying, yeah, Tim's pretty cool, but I'm just going to keep doing this.
Other than losing your license, nothing.
All right, done.
Just when you do that, save the state a lot of trouble. Just put your license in an envelope and send it back to them, because eventually that's what's going to happen. And Fannie, or excuse me, I don't want to limit it to Fannie. The GSEs audit appraisals all the time. And when everybody else in the neighborhood says that your typical site is worth $85,000, and you put it in at 60 because that's what the property appraiser says, then Fannie is going to want to know what makes you so smart. And in the same vein, if somebody complains and sends your report into the state, then the state, as part of its responsibilities, is going to look at your appraisal report line by line. And if there is nothing in the appraisal report to support that $60,000 value, especially when it should be $85,000, and remember, the state has records too, the state's going to want to know how and why you came up with $65,000. And if you can't market support it, then there's the opportunity for you to spend even a more unpleasant afternoon with the members of the state appraisal board.
Yeah. And I'm just going to state it. You're being kind. You're being, the gentleman that you always are. I'm just going to put it on the table, folks. If you don't have land sales and you throw in a tax value as a substitute, it's just plain lazy. It's not doing your job. There's so many other approaches that you can use to come up with, with what you're looking for. That to say I don't have land sales, therefore my next best choice is to find out whatever the tax assessment is and throw that in there is, again, I'll just say it, it's lazy. So Tim, agree, disagree, plead the fifth.
Justin, it might be lazy, and it might simply be not knowing it better.
Well, there you go.
The line, that's what I was taught to do, is very common. And a lot of appraisers go, oh, well, my mentor said it was okay, so I'm going to do it. Well, this is where we get into critical thinking. And you take a look at it and you say, well, wait a minute. I'm trying to borrow money to buy a boat, put my kids through college, go on vacation, whatever it is. Therefore, I want the data in my appraisal to be as accurate as possible, because I want to borrow as much money as I possibly can. And to take that shortcut is to not engage in protocols that appraisers are supposed to engage. And then to tell your client, oh yeah, this is the market value, and I didn't come up with it. The property appraiser was kind enough to come up with it, and I just shared it with you, is misleading, because it says right there on the form, market value of the vacant site. So is that an alternative? Yeah, it's an alternative. And when you're pounding a nail, one of the alternatives is to hit your thumb with every other stroke. It's a legitimate alternative, but really, is that the alternative you want to take? So it comes down to a decision, comes down to Justin's scope of work.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate the clarification. Let's pause here and remind everybody of our great sponsors. Of course, Alamode Software is, it's the report writing software that leads the world in report writing software for all appraisers. I've been using it for nearly 3 decades, nearly 30 years, folks. And I'll tell you, they've never let me down. Are they software? Do they have bugs and problems? Once in a while. Certainly. I mean, software, that's the way it works. But folks, they lead the country and really the world in report writing software because of their top-notch tech support team, the fact that they have all the bells and whistles that you will need to create an efficient yet quality product. If you're with any other company, I urge you to take a look at Alamode. Call them at 800 Alamode, or pick up your laptop and type in alamode.com to learn more. Datamaster is another great company out there saving appraisers time. And as you've heard me say 100 times on this program, folks, when you save appraisers time, you save appraisers money, because time is money. And Datamaster will save you about 40 minutes on every report that you do. Every one. Count it up. Just look at the volume that you do. What, 20 appraisals a month, 30 appraisals a month, 40 more? Times that by 40 minutes, divide that by 60, and find out how many hours this great program can save you if they're in your area. Check them out by going to datamasterusa.com. Again, it's datamasterusa.com. And finally, we are sponsored by a great company who is in the know when it comes to what's going on in the appraisal industry. I'll give you an example. There's a lawsuit going on right now with regard to racial bias in Northern California. And folks, I've been watching Working RE very closely because guess what? They're watching the case very closely. That's a great example of the great journalists over there at Working RE. They care about what's going on with your chosen career. Therefore, you should care about following what they have to share with you. To learn more and to get their free email, you just have to jump onto their website, wait a few minutes, and a little box will pop up. What is their website, you ask? WorkingRE.com. Write it down. It's WorkingRE.com. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. My good friend, Mr. Tim Anderson. Tim, you know, I was on a mastermind this week with a group. I won't tell you who, but a female participant was praising your name, my friend, saying that she had recently reached out to you on a situation that she was dealing with. I honestly can't remember if it was a state board thing or something else, but she said, I took your advice, Dustin. I called Tim, and I do not regret it. So thank you, Tim, for that. Thank you for your service. Tell the listeners a little bit more about what you do.
Dustin, thank you. When somebody gets in trouble with the state board, you need help. It's that simple. We're not equipped to play this game, and we shouldn't even try. And in fact, trying to play that game is, well, as the old saying goes, when you're in a hole, stop digging. So you get in touch with your E&O insurance. You get in touch with me. I might recommend an attorney. And we do our best to make sure that the problem is as small as possible and goes away as quickly and inexpensively as possible. And sometimes that's very quickly and very inexpensively. Sometimes it's not. But the point is, Dustin, you can't play this game. Appraisers are just not equipped to do it. And to try to do it alone is going to cost you a lot of time and a lot of money unnecessarily. So that's the service I provide. I don't appraise anymore, as you know. I provide that service. I consult, I podcast, I write, etc. But the appraiser who finds him or herself on the wrong end of that letter needs counsel, and that's part of what I do.
Well, you're being modest because that is only part of what you do. One of the things that you do also leads us to our next question. And some of the thing you mentioned consulting. One of the services that you provided to me years ago was that I took, I believe, three sample appraisal reports, maybe a multifamily, a drive-by and a full, I don't know, but sent the samples over to you. You spent some time going through those samples, and then we met together, and you basically told me how I can improve my product. And the reason this leads into, and by the way, that was money well spent, I will say. The exchange that you and I had, the value I think on my side was much greater than probably the value that you received on your side, because it changed the way I do appraising. And I don't want to overemphasize it because I'm not. It really did change the way I appraise, and it also changed my templates. For example, probably the thing that I remember most, and it's been several years since you and I got together on something like this, but I do remember that we spent a lot of time talking about highest and best use, and the way that I was handling highest and best use in my reports, I thought was just fine. And you were very kind and very professional and didn't beat me up, but said, hey, Dustin, you can do better. Let me talk about some things that can be better, which leads me to my next question on the table. And this, again, is a conglomeration of multiple questions. But Tim, let's talk about highest and best use. And the question on the table is, isn't highest and best use just a function of the subject's zoning? If the zoning is R1, it's residential, right?
Dustin, yeah, that's absolutely true. And the Grand Canyon is just a hole in the ground in Arizona. So what we have to do is take a look at what highest and best use is from a standpoint of the appraisal process. And first of all, I'm going to get on my soapbox and jump up and down on the appraisal education conglomerate and tell them they're doing a lousy job, because they are. And the reason they're doing a lousy job is because they're not training appraisers in highest and best use. Now, highest and best use does not have to be difficult. I completely agree. But the point is, your state appraisal board, when it gets a hold of your file, is going to say, okay, would you please be kind enough to tell us how you decided that the highest and best use of the property as improved was its present use. And if the appraiser says, well, it's zoned residential, that's certainly one reason, but it's not the only reason, because there are at least 4 components of highest and best use according to the 15th edition of the Appraisal of Real Estate. Actually, there are 8 according to the 15th edition, but we're going to go with 4. And then in USPAP, there are 5 components to highest and best use. And is zoning one of them? Yes, most assuredly is. but is not the only one. And as a result, the appraiser has got to understand that it's necessary to analyze all of them and then summarize in the report the analyses behind each of the components of highest and best use, leading to the highest and best use. Now, part of highest and best use is knowing what the site is worth vacant, simply because the best way to decide if the highest and best use of the property is as improved is to take the value via the sales comparison approach and subtract the site value from it. If it's positive, then the improvements, the highest and best use of the site has improved. I mean, that's very straightforward. It's very simple. It can be more complex than that, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. So as a result, in order not to misrepresent anything, in order not to mislead the client, in order not to conceal any irrelevant, pertinent information, you've got to understand what the site is worth as if it were vacant and available to be put to its highest and best use. And just because it's residential, what? Is it 2 bedrooms and 1 bath? Is it 3 bedrooms and 2 baths? Is it 4 bedrooms and 3.5 baths? Is it 1,400 square feet? Is it 2,500 square feet? Is it Tudor? Is it French Mediterranean? Is it Victorian? Is it ranch? Is it modern? Is it 1 story, 2 stories? Does it have a basement? Is the basement finished, unfinished? All of those questions, the appraiser can answer right out of the market. And the easiest way to do that is take a look at the last 25 sales in the neighborhood. What were they? If 20 of the last 25 sales in the neighborhood were all 3 2s with 1,800 square feet on a quarter-acre lot, that pretty much tells you what the highest and best use is.
Right.
And then by definition, functional obsolescence is nothing more than the difference between what's there and what should be there. So in order to determine if there's functional obsolescence, you have to understand what should be there if the site were vacant. And if what's there isn't what you would put there if the site were vacant today, there's a functional obsolescence issue. So the concept of highest and best use is not difficult. It is, however, rather wide. And the educational conglomerate of real estate appraisal just doesn't teach it. And that's a shame because appraisers are held responsible for it.
Sounds like a lot of work, Tim.
It is. Can be.
I love your bluntness. It makes me laugh, my friend. No, you're right. It is. But one thing that you told me, and I don't want to mischaracterize, so please correct me. I'm just going to, in layman's terms, you said it much more professionally than I'm about to. But 9 times out of 10, we know what the highest best use is up front. It's very obvious. We still have to approach it. We still have to go through it. But the laborious process of highest and best use is not typically there unless you have an unusual situation, right?
Typically, yeah. I mean, it's a house. It's zoned residential. It's surrounded by houses. The zoning isn't going to change. The land use isn't going to change. Nobody's buying the houses and tearing them down and building something else. So yeah, the highest and best use as improved is most likely what's there. But that's one of the 2 highest and best use questions. The other is, if it were vacant, what would you put there? And by understanding what you would put there if it were vacant and comparing that with what's there is how you determine if there's functional obsolescence. And a lot of appraisers have in their boilerplate something along the lines of no functional obsolescence was noted. Well, first of all, you don't notice functional obsolescence unless it stands out, like a 5-bedroom, 1-bath house. That stands out. But typically, you have to extract it from the market. You have to go through the analysis. And I'll almost guarantee you that if you've got a 30-year-old house, there's functional obsolescence. If for no other reason, then it's built with dated materials and it's built to a dated building code. So yes, there's functional obsolescence. And to say there's not just because, well, that's the way I was trained, that's what my mentor taught me, is incorrect. And the state really doesn't care what your mentor taught you. The state cares that you tell your client the truth, because that's what Standard Rule 2-3 says. I certify that to the best of my knowledge and belief. Every statement of fact in this appraisal report is true and correct. And to say there isn't any functional obsolescence when indeed there is neither true nor correct.
Right. Right. Very good. Tim, you're wonderful. I appreciate your knowledge. I appreciate your insight. I appreciate the fact that you've dedicated your life in helping educate appraisers. If they have their interest piqued, which I hope they have through this episode, and they're interested in your services, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Dustin, contact me at tim@theappraisersadvocate.com, and I will happily consult with you. And if I can help you, I will. If I can't help you, I'll send you to where you can get some help.
Thank you, Tim. My best to you and yours. And until next time.
Dustin, thank you. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. My best to you and your family.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. We're going to pause here. Oops, I hit the wrong pause button. I hit mute thinking I was muting you, Tim. Sorry. You muted yourself. Okay, let's, editor, let's back up to where Tim just got finished talking.